back to Masters of Modern. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bateman.
What's up, guys? What's going on? I'm so happy to be here, so hype right now on this episode, Alex. This is close to the most excited I've been for an episode of our show in a while, I have to tell you.
Wow. What has changed since last week?
Well, a couple things have changed. The first and the biggest of which is that, they made Arena available on Mac like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so that happened. I've played a lot of it. I have a lot of thoughts on Historic, which is the thing I've played the most of. I can't wait to talk about that. I think we're going to talk about that tonight. We have played live Magic on stream now, Monday nights, the last 3 Mondays. And last night, because you have been like aggressively trying to get me into EDH, we tried CEDH with Jim and Braden, and it was awesome. It was really fun, and I built a super powerful deck off of just a stock list, so I didn't have to try to. And I had so much fun. There's so many free counter spells and reactive things, and so I've gotten to have multiple great Magic experiences in the last week. When COVID hit, it was tough, man. There was the playing Magic aspect of my life took a major hit, and when you're not playing a lot of Magic, it's harder to be excited about Magic. It's tough to show up and want to do a great podcast. You have to work a little harder. You got to reach in a little deeper,
Well, welcome to playing Magic again. Welcome to consistent Magic
Cheers.
activity. This week's episode is actually going to be about that. So we're going to be talking, for people jumping in, we're going to be talking about Historic and what the Historic metagame looks like. Ben has climbed literally from nothing, from the bottom. He started, and now he is at what tier are you today? And you're going to even try getting a little farther tonight after we record?
I started from the bottom. Now I'm here, is what I think you were looking for. And yes.
I know what I was making a reference to.
Your backwards reference.
Yeah.
I started in bronze or whatever. And I built this blue-black rogues deck that we'll talk about. And I climbed all 4 levels of bronze, all 4 levels of silver, all 4 levels of gold. And tonight, I'm right now on tier 2 of platinum. So I expect tonight probably I should be able to jump from platinum to diamond. My understanding is getting to mythic is pretty hard. So I don't think by Thursday, which I think is when the season resets, I will be able to climb from platinum to mythic. But you never know. It's possible that I just get a crazy idea tomorrow and I'm just you know what? I'm just going to do this until I get to mythic. I'm just going to do it. I think it's really hard to do, and I don't think the deck I'm playing is good enough to do it, but we are going to talk about that because, look, I've played for 10 hours or something, and I've climbed from nothing up into mid-platinum now, high platinum, so.
Cool. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about that, what the metagame look like. We also have a new way of playing on Arena that we want to kind of talk to you guys about. That's just kind of taking advantage of other ways we like to play. And we've been playing, and we even talked about Gladiator Magic, and that gave us kind of the idea to look at other ways to play on Arena. And so we've been working with our friends to come up with a new format idea. And so we're going to be talking through that. And yeah, so to get started, let's talk about the deck list. Let's talk about the deck you've been playing on Arena in Historic and how you came to it.
Well, I want to give a big shout out to Andrew Kelso and Cam Albergini, who are the nobles of House Modern. Pinkies out for you guys here. We very much appreciate all of your support. Go to patreon.com/theMMcast. Check out all the different perks and tiers. We're about to roll out a second update because we did one right at the time COVID started. So all the fun stuff we sort of had in mind got a little bit put on hold because I haven't seen Alex in 5 months.
Well, it's also for instance, we never updated the video on our Patreon or our YouTube channel that were part of the plans of that rebrand and launch. We also didn't get a chance to some of the things that we were trying to do were really more dependent on us being able to not be in a COVID environment. And so now that exists, some new things are around. So all this live streaming we're doing could be featured in different ways in Patreon. And then so figuring out how to incorporate the new norm into our Patreon structure is something we're excited to do.
Exactly. So the deck that I'm playing, so this is kind of where I started. They've now released a few different expansions in Historic. So for anybody who kind of doesn't understand the Historic economy, what makes it a little different from the other formats, just a quick refresher. Obviously you have a number of sets that are available. Every set that has been released on Magic Arena that's the basis for it. But the thing that they've done on Arena is they've released these anthology sets. So the expansions the Historic, what is it called? Historic Anthology, right?
Yeah.
Historic.
Yeah, you said it right. Historic Anthology 1, 2, and 3. There's been 3.
Yeah, and what they do, it's their opportunity to kind of give you a few old weird cards just to add 20 or 30 cards to the format in a way that they can't really do in paper because it takes them 1.5 to 2 years to react. The last one obviously being Jumpstart, where you had a bunch of other cool cards that were introduced into Historic. So why that got me so excited and where I started was like, okay, what weird gem that I have a real like a penchant for, an attachment to, do I want to try to build around? Because there's not that many cards available on Arena, and these got me excited. So the first place I actually started was I built a blue-green Merfolk deck that was built around Marrow Regery, because they made, modern staple Marrow Regery available in Historic. And there's some pretty good stuff in blue-green Merfolk. You can play the 1/1 for 2, that when you cast a Merfolk, you get counters. I really like that guy a lot. And I played that deck a bit, and I thought it was fun. But when I saw that Oona's Blackguard had been put into Jumpstart, which I know you guys know how much I love Oona's Blackguard. For anybody who doesn't know what that card is, 1 black, 1 colorless for a 1/1 flying fairy rogue. Whenever another rogue enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to an opponent, that opponent discards a card. So what's really interesting about this card, and where I think people miss, is that the rogue synergy is one of the only good pieces of rogue synergy they've ever printed. So like, it's hard to make a rogues deck, but creatures with counters on them making your opponents discard when they hit is actually just really good. It's a 2-mana 1/1 flyer that just makes it so that everything with a counter on it
is a hypnotic
is
striker.
And if you set it up right in like a tempo deck where they don't see it coming because it has like flash creatures and stuff like that, you can set up turns where you're like, okay, I like hit you for 3 and you discard 2 cards. Or in some cases where you like flash in a guy, play a second Blackguard, and you're like, Mind Twist, your whole hand's gone. And that can just end the game sometimes. So I built a blue-black rogues deck on the back of Oona's Blackguard. That was sort of the inspiration for it. And there's a few other synergies in there. We'll post the full list in the description so you guys can see what I've been doing. I've been playing best of 1, so I do have a full 75 built, but I have tuned this to try to be a best of 1 deck. And I've tried to tune it for the meta I've been playing against. But the main pieces of it are Thieves Guild Enforcer, which is the M21 card, which is 1 black for a 1/1 flying flat or 1/1 flash that states whenever a rogue enters the battlefield under your control, mill 2 of your opponent's cards, and if they have 8 or more cards in their graveyard, gets +2/+1 and Death Touch. So at best, your Thieves Guild Enforcer is a flash 3/2 with Death Touch, which is really good. And also like the 1 mana with the Oona's Blackguard, that's all really cool. So other cards that I'm playing that are just like sort of standards are like, I'm playing like 2 or 3 copies of Brazen Borrower because it's a great card and it's also a rogue. The one card that I added in that I think has been like pretty underrated is what's he called? Faerie Vandal. 1 blue, 1 colorless, 1/2 flash flyer. Whenever you draw your second card on any given turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him. So what's cool about this card is that it being a 1/2 allows you to play like pretty good tempo against the 1/1s in the format, specifically when you're getting beat down early by the Goblins deck, which is a big player in the format. Having a flash 1/2 is a really nice way to just like stop a little bit of damage and get some tempo. But also, because of Blackguard, when this comes down, it becomes a 2/3. And because Shock is one of the most prominent pieces of interaction in the format, as soon as this thing has come down with a Blackguard, they can no longer kill it as long as you've set it up right so that they don't have open mana. Also, Curious Obsession is in the deck because you're playing a bunch of cheap stuff. So Curious Obsession on this guy is really good. Just like I'll attack with my 2/3, hit you, draw a card, and then make it a 3/4, which is great. Brineborn Cutthroat, which is not a rogue, but is just a really good card that gets counters. And obviously you get counters when you're playing all your flash stuff. So that's really powerful. Faerie Miscreant, which is a fine 1-drop. It's especially good in this deck, again, because of the Vandals and also because of Blackguard. They just will sometimes come down as 2/2 flyers for 1, which is good. You also want to play on the margins with this deck, right? Like you want to make sure you have enough things that cost 2 and enough things that cost 1, so that when you play a 2-drop, you can hold open like a Spell Pierce, or you can hold open, you can represent holding open Pierce, but also have like the Thieves Guild Enforcer open or something like that. So having enough 1-drops is pretty important. Some small amount of permission. I think the deck I'm currently playing has like 1 essence, whatever, the blue counterspell that if you counter a creature with it, it's counter target creature, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. That card's pretty good in this deck, Essence Capture, because obviously the counters theme. So there are situations where you go like 1-drop creature, pass, second land, hold open Essence Capture with a Blackguard in hand, counter their creature, play Blackguard, holding open Spell Pierce. Now you attack with your 1/1 creature that has a counter on it. They discard a card, and now you're like really ahead.
Right.
That's one of my like favorite early turns. I think probably playing a second copy of that card is like the more I'm playing it is like necessary. Little bit of like Oh, go ahead.
Well, if the format is like so represented by goblins, then we're going to get into the metagame, and even stuff like Uro, which are creatures with spells attached. Essence Capture is pretty close to just counterspell, right? So the fact that it's counterspell plus a benefit. Now, can you cast Essence Capture if you can't cast Essence Capture if you don't have a creature in play? Correct. It's negative.
No, you can. It's up to.
Put a counter on up to one. Okay. So then there is no cost.
It's just Essence Scatter. It's Essence Scatter for blue that has the upside of a counter.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I think the last pieces of the deck that I'm forgetting are like I'm playing a single copy of Rankle. Could be two. Rankle's really good. Rankle's also especially good with Blackguard, just because it has haste, so it comes down, gets a counter, attacks for 4, and then like you get all the triggers. That's one of the problems with Blackguard, right? Is that you have to play it, keep it alive, get something in, and then have the chance to attack.
Right.
So if you can get Rankle down, you get a lot of pump the turn you play it. Pilfer, Ghostly Pilferer, our preview card, 1 blue, 1 colorless, 2/1 rogue. You can discard a card to make it unblockable. When it untaps, you can pay 2 colorless to draw a card, and if a spell an opponent casts anywhere from other than their hand, you draw a card. That card's good. It always feels like the clunkiest card in the deck, but it's always good when I play it. You can close out games with it really nicely because like you're just drawing lands and like probably making it. It's probably a 3/2 at that point usually because you're playing it later after a Blackguard's in play. So being able to get in for 3 unblockable is a strong way to win the game. Yeah, and then like a couple Disfigures, a couple of that new spell, the black one, destroy target creature or planeswalker, CMC 3 or less. I can't think what the name of that card is. I think I'm playing a Negate, 2 Spell Pierces, maybe 1 Spell Pierce. I think that's the deck. I think that's pretty much what the deck is. And I'm playing a single copy of Witch's Vengeance in the main deck.
Okay.
and sometimes even as many as 2 in the main deck.
So famously, one of our preview cards, our Eldraine preview card, which was -3/-3 to all creatures of a creature type of your choice. It like was a card that if it had been printed a year earlier would have been more exciting, but because Plague Engineer was in Modern Horizons, it just like was now no longer going to be something that really is going to take it under consideration. Though in Historic, Plague Engineer is not there, and right now, like deck 0 is the Goblins deck. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's been really fun. I've changed a few things around as I've played with it. The shell is pretty close to what I built in the first place. It's like pretty interactive, and also it just seems to get around what people are doing. People don't see it coming. There aren't a lot of decks that deal with blocking flyers that well. So as long as you can stop them from doing what they're doing, you have enough interaction, you can put like board states together pretty fast where you're attacking for like 3 or 4 or 5 in the air and end the game pretty fast. The one thing is the deck does run out of gas. Like a lot of the decks I like to play, it plays a lot of low CMC cards. You don't have many catch-up cards, which is why Rankle is so important. And I think why probably a second copy of Rankle is good. There are definitely some interactions in the deck that feel really powerful. Like there are some things that just feel really good. Take for instance, like sometimes there'll be combat situations where you'll flash in a Thieves Guild Enforcer with a Blackguard in play, and you'll have sequenced it just right. So okay, I'm going to flash this in. It's going to get the last 2 cards in their graveyard because they already have 6 and I've counted. And, it's going to pump my Brineborn Cutthroat 1. It's going to come down, get a counter on it. So now I'm going to be blocking with like a 4/3 Death Touch that came in for 1 mana that they like didn't see coming. There's some plays like that just blow people out. And you once you play the deck enough, you start to figure out like where those are. I definitely think the card I would probably think about cutting would be the Ghostly Pilferer, just because I think having a sorcery speed 2-drop is like never something I want in the deck. But right now, there's not something better than that, and it does add some inevitability to the deck.
And you were just talking about one of its biggest problems is it doesn't have like something to do late game, right? Like you're running out of gas, and like that card by itself builds gas, right? Based on the fact that it can basically take like whatever. If you are drawing lands every turn or drawing creatures that are just like mediocre, you can turn them into unblockable damage every turn and draw up from there.
There's also the fact that card with Curious Obsession is excellent. It's one of the best. It's one of the best Curious Obsession targets probably in Historic, I would think, just because if you can find any way to protect it, you're attacking for 3 every turn, drawing the extra card to discard to make it unblockable, and having the ability to draw another card during upkeep for 2, at which point like you probably are holding up in a counterspell. And that's really good. And I think there's maybe a different deck. There's maybe a different Curious Obsession Ghostly Pilferer deck that I could build that's not taking advantage of the synergies of this one as much, but it's really just trying to make that happen. Because they also printed Curiosity into the format. You can play Curiosity as well. So there's some cool stuff there. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm doing with the deck. I've played most of the important matchups in the format. I can go through some of those.
And before we get into it, because the next thing I want to talk about is like kind of what does the metagame of Historic look like? What are kind of the big decks? Obviously, Goblins is something we mentioned, and we can go over that as well. But before we do that, make sure to if you're watching, follow, subscribe. Make sure to hit the like button. It's a big help for all algorithm reasons. So you doing that is a favor to us, and we appreciate it. We'd love to get a comment if you think of cool cards that would work in Ben's deck, or if there's a deck you'd like Ben to try out in Historic, we'd love to see lists. So please comment them below, and we'd love to check those out. And then also, once again, subscribe, like, all those good things. If you're watching on, if you're listening or you're not watching on YouTube, we do this on YouTube. There's a bunch of card art. It's a cool place to check it out. And then also, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we're now doing live streams of Commander content every Monday at 8:30. So you can go check out on either the YouTube channel, we'll live stream it, or also on twitch.tv/KessWiley. And then Ben on Bateman Streaming, which is twitch.tv/Ben Bateman Streaming. Is doing just streams regularly, multiple times a week. So it's also another good place to follow. He's also hit an affiliate as of this week. Congratulations, Ben. As of today. So you eventually will get cool emotes. I don't know what they'll be, but they're going to be sweet. If you follow me, you get a Baby Yoda emote. He's drinking tea. And yeah, Historic, the metagame of Historic. Obviously, right now it looks like deck 0 is the Goblins deck. This is taking advantage of the new card Muxus, which is a Goblin for 6 mana, 4 red, 4/4 Goblin Noble legendary creature. When Muxus Goblin Grandy. When Muxus Goblin Grandy enters the battlefield, reveal the top 6 cards of your library. Put all Goblin creature cards with converted mana cost 5 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. When Muxus attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each other goblin you control. So he's just like Siege Gang Commander on crack, right? Like he just comes in, gains you so much value, puts so much power in play. You can get him into play as early as turn 3, I believe. So if you play Skirt Prospector into Goblin Instigator. Yeah. You have the 6 mana you need on turn 3 to be able to go off, and it's just like super powerful. Plus, it just plays the Conspicuous Snoop backup game plan that does really cool stuff like Krenko Mob Boss. The amount of times I've actually been blown out in Historic with a Conspicuous Snoop and a War Boss was on top. Krenko was on top, and they were just able to make like 6 tokens. And I was like, I don't know if I could actually ever beat that. As it makes me sad. But yeah, so Goblins is on top. How do you feel about the Goblin decks just like running rampant?
Well, I hate the Goblins deck. The funny thing is I've played against the Goblins deck probably like 15 times now, and they've never resolved the Muxus against me a single time. And
it's probably one of the strengths your deck has.
Say what?
It's probably one of the strengths your deck has, right? It can prevent them from playing some of their big plays.
Yeah, I mean, when I was playing early, I was running against it, and so I started to tune the deck a little bit more to make sure that I had answers for it. Because the way that the Muxus deck sort of works is like, if they resolve Muxus, whether they have a big board or they just resolve it without a big board, it's pretty game breaking. Like it's a huge card, and there are a few other plays the deck has. Like definitely, if they can get down a Lord that gives their guys haste and then resolve Krenko or something like that, like they get a lot of goblins. It's hard for you to come back from that. So there's the things you have to kind of make sure you keep off the board are the Lords. So there's the cost reducer 3-drop Lord, and then there's the haste +1/+1 Chieftain Lord. Those guys are really important. And then Krenko himself, obviously. But the thing about Krenko is that Krenko costs 4. So if they don't have haste on Krenko, they're investing a lot of mana into that turn, which like Drown in the Loch. Oh, I'm playing 2 Drown in the Lochs. I didn't mention that. Drown in the Loch is a really important card in the deck. It's like Drown in the Loch or like the Essence Capture card I was talking about. Those are all really good. You know, having the Borrowers are really good. If they like resolve the Krenko and they don't have haste, and you just like bounce it, it's like a full on time walk. You just need to make sure you have like a clock. The whole reason Witch's Vengeance is even in the deck is that I hate the Goblins deck so much that I just like, need to like have a way to kill them. And then I mentioned some of the flash stuff is really good, like trading with their Lords if they get greedy and they don't see it coming. Like Brineborn Cutthroat is just a good removal spell. Like flashing that in and blocking Chieftain is like super strong.
Sure.
And the thing is, if they get greedy, that's the thing about that deck that's interesting. That deck, if they take their time, and they don't go for it every turn, probably wins. But if they take their time and they may, sorry, if they take their time, they don't go for it. But if they go for it and they're like, I'm going to push maximum damage here and then also try to combo off, and you can interact with them, you can stop what they're doing pretty hard. Because like Ringleader's fine, but it doesn't do anything other than just fill their hand.
Sure.
And Krenko's great, but it doesn't do anything if it doesn't have haste. And like, Muxus is awesome, but it doesn't matter if they can't cast it. So it's basically the Lords and Prospector, which you have to kill. That's what I found so far anyway. I've lost to it, but I've never lost to a Muxus. So that deck is really good. I think that's one of the most powerful. The Uro decks are probably the most impossible decks for me to beat.
I think like Temur Reclamation, Uro, Growth Spiral, like stuff that currently actually even in Standard is doing really well. I think actually Temur Reclamation is the most featured, according to MTG Goldfish, archetype currently in Historic, and it just is playing just all of the good ramp spells that have existed. It has Explore available to it as well, right? Which is an insane combo of cards. So there's just a lot of really powerful things. And then uses Expansion Explosion as its main, and Shark Typhoon as its main to I have double the mana because of Wilderness Wilderness Reclamation in play combos. And I think this is like there's just a lot of calls for Growth Spiral to be banned in multiple formats just because it's so powerful. And I think even before the ban announcement, Wilderness Reclamation was on a lot of people's chopping lists. And this is just, replaced the extra turn card that got banned that I'm now forgetting.
Nexus of
Fate with Expansion Explosions and Shark Typhoons. And that's pretty much enough to keep it on top.
What's interesting about that is Shark Typhoon is such a good card because it against my deck specifically, it's quite good because like for 4 mana, they can usually block and kill whatever flyer I have and also draw a card, and they like are ramping. So that's a turn 3 play for them, but it's not counterable, right? Because it's a cycle effect, which is what makes it so good. I still think the number 1 card is Uro. I could really, Uro and Field are like the 2 cards that I play against that I'm like, these don't feel very fair. Like they feel sort of silly. Because the Golos deck, there's a Golos ramp deck that's pretty good also right at the top. Like the big mana decks seem to be the most powerful things people are doing.
Right.
So yeah, I think tuning like counter magic probably to be able to beat those is important. Some of the other stuff that you are playing against is there's a mono blue tempo deck. It's very similar to the one in Standard from a few years ago. It's Curious Obsession and Storm Tamer, Spectral Sailor, like just a lot of the cards you're used to seeing. There's like a sacrifice deck that people play with Mayhem Devil, Croxa, a few other things like that. That's a pretty cool deck. Plays Cat Oven. There's a Gruul Aggro deck a lot of people play. There's a Soul Sisters deck that's been popping up more and more. I see like a lot more of it now.
How often are you running into Kethis combo?
I've not played against Kethis combo once.
Okay, that one I'm is pretty sweet. It's just like able to use Mox Ambers and Kethis to like go off and do insane things. It's pretty sweet. Definitely, it's like kind of the like by turn 5 I will combo resiliently deck in the format, which I think is really interesting. Like Historic has gotten its own version of Splinter Twin in some ways with this deck. It's just I think it's also like extremely difficult to play, and it's all mythic rares basically. It's like just a deck filled with mythic rares. So like a lot of people just don't have the wild cards to be able to build it.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit rather than just talking about sort of all the best decks. I think talking about what the format's doing, because we're a modern podcast, obviously, sort of comparing it to modern, like, and figuring, because what I was saying to you when I called you about it, I was so excited to talk about it, is like this actually feels a little bit less powerful, but similar to playing modern in 2012. This feels a bit like it was in the early days, those early like World Championships and around the time we were getting bannings. Like you don't have as good of cards as like Dark Confidant, Liliana, Tarmogoyf. Like you don't have those level cards.
Kind of like Uro is easily at that power level, right? Like you have Teferi and Narset, and like you have all the War of the Spark cards. Like remember, like part of this format is it's made out of 2020 and 2019 Magic, which is historically and famously the most broken 2 years of Magic. So though it doesn't have the breadth of power level that those formats had, right? It doesn't have the like that many of those cards, but it's still has cards that are at that power level, and it has a lot of them. And like in the reverse, modern had a much larger ban list, right? Like a lot of the cards that were problematic like they, were immediately banned. So I think it actually might be. I agree with you. I think it feels comparable in power level to Modern back in the day. The removal is
yeah,
worse.
it's totally. So can't we pull up the most played cards in Historic? Isn't that like a thing we can do?
Yeah. Maximize. All right. So not only can you see the most played cards in Historic, but it's currently being recorded. This is a new feature as part of the podcast. So these are the most played cards in Historic. So the top 10 cards overall, Mystic's Dispute is number 1, followed by Aether Gust, then Uro, and Growth Spiral, Best Friends Forever, Bone Crusher Giant, Teferi Time Raveler, Scavenging Ooze, Red Cap Melee, Negate, and Shark Typhoon. Top 10 creatures, things that we're missing. You have Goblin Ruin Blaster, which is one of the best land removal spells in the format, Questing Beast, Brazen Borrower, Llanowar Elves, Shifting Ceratops, Robber of the Rich, which is sweet, and Goblin Chain Whirler.
Chain Whirler's good.
And then spells that weren't mentioned that are in the top 10 after that, Embercleave, Shatter the Sky, which is the best board wipe, and Dovin's Veto, and then just lands you can look at as well. But if we want to look at even more,
so some of the stuff. So yeah, click on exactly. So a couple things to really point out that I think if you're comparing to Modern, so we don't have Lightning Bolt, we have Shock, we have Lightning Strike. Those are the 2 burn spells that compare, right? So people playing the red decks will often be playing Shocks as their piece of interaction, and for the most part of the format, that's fine. It gets the job done. You guys have seen it in Standard. You know Shock like.
I think Lava Coil to me would be where I would like the closest red removal spell, right? Where yes, it costs 2 mana, but like everything is a mana more than in Modern for the most part, and so you have.
But Lava Coil doesn't hit a player, and so Lava Coil is really good if you're specifically trying to kill creatures. But for decks that want to have like that versatility, so the mono red decks, or even the control decks, like I played against like a 1,000-Year Storm deck, like they're playing Lightning Strikes and Shocks because they want to be able to control the game, but also win the game. So that's like your red, your main red thing people are doing. We mentioned Goblins. That's the best red deck, so like in terms of pure red. You talk about black, there's no efficient hand disruption for 1 mana. Duress is the closest you get. It's fine. Duress is okay. You don't have an Inquisition or a Thoughtseize. There's a 2 black card some of the black decks will play. There's like a mono black deck a lot of people will play. And it's like, look at it, target opponent's hand, exile an online card from it, lose 1 life. That's something people will play, but there's not like a good turn 1 thing. Murderous Rider, just like it is and was in Standard, is good. Like people like that card a lot. You have the newer removal spells, like the ones that were just printed. So I mentioned the 1 black, 1 colorless card destroys a creature or planeswalker CMC 3 or less. You just were clicking a Heartless Act there. That's definitely a good one. That's the card. Exactly, Agonizing. Duress. So that's like the things people are doing in black for the most part. There's a Zombies deck. There's a Vampires deck that's like pretty good. It's not that far from the one that we saw in Standard. So Night of the Even Legion is in there. Then in green, mono green,
you got Llanowar
there's elves.
Yeah,
you definitely see a good amount of elves. There's a Craterhoof Behemoth, like Marwen, big mana elf deck that I play against a bunch. It's another reason why I think having Witch's Vengeance in the main is actually pretty relevant. I actually earlier today was playing a game and I Witch's Vengeance and I 6 for 1 of them and I still lost because Marwen was already too big, and like they just played Marwen and then played Craterhoof the next turn because Marwen was huge and I couldn't deal with the Marwen and a Craterhoof and I lost after 6 for 1ing them. So that's like sort of what they're doing in green. You have the elves deck, and then other than like Llanowar Elf, really, Scavenging Ooze you mentioned is a good creature. Questing Beast, you have good creatures, but that's kind of what green has. You don't really have much else other than like really good creatures.
I mean, Scavenging Ooze is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's great.
And like Uro and Growth Spiral, right? That's green. Yes, there's blue on the other half, but
I was gonna say it's blue-green though. Like because I'm thinking like, in terms of mono color, like what are the things you're doing? Like why are you in a color? That's like what I'm trying to establish first, because
I think it's Wilderness Reclamation too, right? Like Wilderness Reclamation is the green card defining the format, with Llanowar Elf being the other one. Like kind of the 2 decks you described, like those are the 2 things to really look at, and then Uro and Growth Spiral and really lead you down those paths as well, with like Explore being backup Growth Spiral. So I think that's like the ramp of the format is what green is doing, which is normally what it's doing.
Yeah. White doesn't have much. It's got Glass Casket, so exile something CMC 3 or less. It's got the Soul Sisters cards, which are good. Like definitely the Soul Sisters cards are good. Like that deck is powerful because it's playing a Johnny's Pride mate, so you're able to make it big when you gain life. It has Soul Warden, but it also has the 1 mana card from Theros that you can sacrifice to give target creature or enchantment you control protection from the color of your choice till end of turn.
Mm-hmm.
So having that in play, and I think it has lifelink as well. Just having that guy in play makes it pretty hard to interact with the deck.
Sure.
Plus, they have Sarah Ascendant was like the really sweet card that got reprinted that makes that deck like legitimately good.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they get out in front of you fast, it's hard to beat the Sarah Ascendant. That card's really good.
Sure. I also think like once again on gold cards, like obviously Teferi Time Raveler being a white card or part like requiring you to be in white is like enough to be in white. You also have like Dovin's Veto, the board wipe Shadow of the Sky, and then Settle the Wreckage are also just like
those are both strong. I mean, Shadow Shadow of the Sky is really good. Those are both good enough to count as 4 mana sweepers. Red has the 4 mana sweeper also like 4 to all creatures and planeswalkers for red 2.
What's interesting about this format is for a while it was kind of joked that like blue wasn't the best in modern in different ways, right? Like people were always like, oh, blue needs to be better, it needs something to do, and like Snapcaster Mage was like kind of the main thing it was powerful in the format, and like this format like pretty definitively blue seems like one of the most powerful things you're doing in the sense that like it's either being paired with stuff like Uro and Ghost Spiral or Teferi and Dovin's Veto, and you have like this weird kind of relationship where all these cards are just so powerful, splashing other colors.
The mono blue stuff. The mono blue stuff is mostly the sideboard stuff, as you can see. The top 2 cards, Dispute and Gust, those are standard all stars, but people know those cards well. It's just that there are so many good blue cards running around between your Teferis, your Ghost Spirals, your Uros. That you kind of just need those cards,
right? And Mystic Dispute
they're
is
almost main deckable.
I mean, Mystic Dispute is like blatantly a main deck card, right? Like the fact that it's like extra good against blue decks is a bonus, but like Mana Leak for 3 mana is not disserviceable when you also get the advantage of it's just like bonkers against the blue card in a format where blue cards are good.
Yeah, I don't play Dispute main deck in my deck. I probably could though. I probably should, honestly. I probably should just replace some of the weaker counter spells with it. But yeah, so that's kind of like what the monocolor stuff they're mostly doing.
Sure.
You mentioned a lot of the multicolor cards and kind of what makes them powerful. But yeah, it definitely does not feel like it's, modern was designed to be a turn 4 format. It doesn't feel like a turn 4 format. There's a couple things you can be doing, the most powerful things that can get you pretty far on turn 4. We obviously mentioned goblins can go nuts. But for the most part, the games are ending on turn 5 or turn 6.
Yeah,
like that's where it is.
It's interesting, like where it used to be like the idea was like standard was a turn 5 format, when really standard has become, or Wizards has aimed for it to be a turn 6. Historic does fit into that turn 5 space, because Pioneer kind of ended up being just another turn 4 format. Modern like is a turn 3, turn 4 format. It's like hybrids between the two of them. The problem with Modern is you can't really let it get better than that without something like Force of Will existing, because like most decks then just won't be able to handle it. They won't be able to deal with it, which, there's an argument that Force of Will should just be printed in the Modern, though Force of Negation is doing a lot of work there. So obviously we'll see where that ends up.
Yeah, but like it definitely feels like the format is really, really ripe to be explored.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think makes it so wonderful and why I've enjoyed playing it so much is that not only do I like the cards, like not only do I think like they're just pretty great, but I think the fact that they can react so quickly because it's on Arena means that this format's going to grow and evolve and develop pretty organically.
Mm-hmm.
And they a few times a year, if they're like, hey, on Thursday we're releasing this set. Oh, you know what? It's Monday. We didn't put this card in. Can we get this card set for Thursday? This one card? I think we should add this one card. Like, I don't know the inner workings if they can actually do that, but in my mind, they're able to. Because, like, why not? Like,
and like the fact that every like 3 months it feels like they have like kind of the idea that they'll be scheduled to release a new set. So we're getting Amonkhet in August, right? Or Amonkhet Block Remastered will be released, and we just got Jumpstart, and so there's going to be a consistent release of content onto it that isn't released into other formats. It's kind of why, I mean, we did the whole episode on Pioneer, right? We did an episode talking about how like Pioneer is always going to be, is like kind of dead. And one of the arguments in that episode was that Historic is always just going to be a more interesting Pioneer or is moving towards that point, just because of the Anthology series, because of Jumpstart now, these are cards that just you can't play in Pioneer, and you never will, right? Pioneer will always not have access to these really cool cards, and so then what's the point? Why not just play Historic? Why not play this format that's a lot more fun and cool, that has a metagame that's built around it and people are excited by? And to me, that leans me to believe that Wizards should just paperize Historic. That's always where kind of I've decided. I've actually been there even before Pioneer was announced. Like, one of my complaints for Pioneer was that it was announced the week after Historic was announced.
Well, here's what's really interesting about that. So when they say it takes a year and a half to 2 years to design, source, print, distribute a set, right? Like, we know that there's a lot of things that go into that decision.
I think it's the
mostly the
shortest run
design.
is 12 months. Yeah,
it's mostly the design. That's the thing that takes the longest. It's like, but imagine that you don't have to do any of that testing or design, and all that's happening is you're saying, like, this thing that works here, we're gonna just take it and we're gonna make a bunch of cards and print this Historic Masters in paper that reflects this thing that's working. And we can do it because we can decide these are the cards that we're printing, and we can release this 3 to 6 months from the time we decide to do it. It doesn't take as long because there's no testing, because it's all reprints, and we have an active metagame where we're looking at as we're doing it. I don't know if that's possible, but in my mind, when I think about it, it's like, I mean, you and I spend a lot of our time talking about retail and selling and distributing. And we know the timeline on things is long, but it's not crazy long. It's not like a year long. Sometimes it's like months.
It's like 9 months, right? Like, for a new product, if for a toy that we have sold and is coming out in February of next year, we began selling it to people starting in March this year. There was a 4-month development time for that product ahead of that, and we have a very short development time schedule compared to Wizards, right? They have at least a year and a half of development time on a set before the point where they start showing it off, right? So then we then pitch it to everybody, right? We show it to everyone. And now into June at the latest for a product that's going to require new tooling is as late as we generally would like to get confirmation, so that we can start getting designs in, so that the design artwork can get into factories. Factories can then cut tooling for Wizards that would be making print plates. And then that takes 60 days. So then we're looking at September. It then takes another 30 days to 60 days to produce that product. For Wizards, it's probably 90 days because they make so much more than we do of a single product. So that puts them end of December, and then takes a month to ship. So just from selling it, getting confirmations of orders, to release of printing, that's a year. Not to mention development of product and everything else. So I that's about the timeline for us, and we're a nimble toy company, right? We only have X amount of people. We're relatively small. We have a few tricks under our belt to react pretty fast to things. And so that's us. I can't imagine Wizards is that. I mean, they have some different advantage, right? They don't really have to sell. Excuse me. At least they don't really have to sell their standard releases. That's like every store that's buying it this year will buy it again next year, same time each year. And it's the new product that sits on the shelf in that space. So that makes their lives a little bit easier, but they also do so much through distribution that you have to add at least a month of time to just product lands into DCs in the US that then get shipped to distribution centers, which then get shipped to retailers. And that all has to happen at pretty much as close to the same moment as possible as they are landing on the shelves at Walmart, Target, etc. So that's a lot of juggling that takes at least a couple months to really plan for.
I think my point is that you can cut some of that timeline off, though, because there's no selling and there isn't really development if you're basing it off. It doesn't. Okay, I guess it's like this. If Historic Masters had to be an exciting product in the way that Modern Masters, or even let's just say Modern Masters, because those are just purely reprint sets.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to service a piece of the economy, the Magic economy, the cards that haven't been reprinted. Yep. They want to be exciting draft sets. Well, I guess if you want to make Historic one of those sets where it's going to be drafted, you have to take your time with it in the same way. But when I think about it, I don't think about it that way. I think about it as a purely supplemental product where it's let's just make sure the cards that people want to be playing are in their hands. So let's just take this list of 100 cards and print them and make it a small print run and sell them. Because then we can make Historic a format.
Well, I don't think you need to do that, right? Most of these cards just exist. like Pioneer had the same influx of these cards are now worth money, right? Like most of the cards in Historic, I mean, there are some that aren't, and I think that you could do from the vault or other things. I do agree that you can maybe print some of them out into the world in ways, but like for the most part, it's not hard to get on Barrow, right? It's not hard to get Cycle Lands. It's not hard to get Fauna Shamans, right? Like these are cards that have been printed a few times. Most people have them in collections in some way, and so if Historic became a format, those cards are as available as I guess Tarmogoyf was when Modern was created. If in fact, a lot of these are way more available than Tarmogoyf was when Modern was first created. So I think that's less of an issue to me. I think the biggest issue for them is just timing of things, right? Like if they wanted to say this is every card in Historic that's not in like hasn't been printed regularly in Standard. Those are hard. Like that could change any moment, right? They could just add more cards. They could be Jumpstart 2, and then now they're balancing that as well. True. So like. Or like there could be Historic Anthology 17 at that point. So I think for me, like I think they would just do it correctly, right? They just release it like a normal master set. I like the idea of doing a Historic Masters to print those cards out, but I don't agree with master sets having to be draft formats from a personal perspective, right? I like wish that they weren't in some ways, because I think one of the big feel bads is you're printing these very expensive draft formats that are very, very, very cool, but most people can't afford, which we've like touched upon in like 4 episodes at this point on the channel. But I do think that Wizards thinks that these need to be draft formats. So I can't imagine Wizards just being like, here's 100 cards. They don't work together. They don't even come in packs. You just like, how does that work for them? They like need draft to work with all product releases or with all main flagship product releases in a way that I don't think that they would do it differently than that, especially because it doesn't cost them that much.
I actually think the more you talk about it and I think about it, I actually don't think releasing a booster pack style release to not be drafted is something they can do. Because everybody knows that you get more value by buying singles. Everybody knows you lose money if you buy a box. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes there's moments when a set is released that if you buy the box, then you can maybe profit from it. But generally speaking, it's more valuable to just buy the cards you want. Mm-hmm. And because everybody knows that, the real reason you buy a pack is because you have an experience that goes along with that pack. And if you buy a pack and you don't open it, you hold on to it, it's because later you'll get to do a chaos draft or something. So if you're releasing a product set in a 15 card, 3 uncommon, 1 rare, booster pack style format, you can't draft it. It's like, why would anybody buy the pack then? Why would anybody open the pack? You would just wait for the cards to be open, buy them. And like, so I think that's like why you would have to sell it that way. Mm-hmm. So I think if it was going to be sold in a way that's like then it has to be more of a premium release. Like, here's, a 75 card premium product that we're selling for $100. It's the 75 most played cards in Historic. You get one of each. It's $100. That's what it is. We're selling it. It's like a secret lair almost.
Except that wouldn't be $100, right? Like right now, the established price for $100 is one of these super packs, right? For double masters.
Yeah.
And that like is 15 cards. They're all promo art stuff, but they're still 15 cards. Like I don't think Wizards ever prints cards in that way. I think it's always going to be like in a different way. Now, secret layers, like doing Historic Anthology 1 as a secret layer is a different idea, right? Because there's not too much mythic on that side. Like there's not too much price cost in there, so you could do that at $150 and $100 and people get real cards. It's hard because it's established arena where people are paying $30 for 4 of each of those cards. It'll be interesting. I think just doing a classic master set is going to be the way, if it does happen, that you could do that with the announcement of Historic going to paper. I also think you don't even need to. I don't think any cards. I think, honestly, the cards at this moment that are powerful and Historic that are going to be the hardest to get your hands on are not even the Anthology cards, it's the Jumpstart cards. And that's just because Jumpstart came out in a pandemic and like sold out immediately, and now trying to get your hands on it is really difficult. So like getting a Muxus is like $100 card in paper if Historic is paper playable.
That idea you're talking about, so when we were building our decks yesterday to play in the CEDH game we played, I was going through the list and I was like, oh yeah, I have this card. Oh yeah, I have that card. And then I was like, wait, I don't have that card because I never have opened a pack of that set. I was like, I don't even think I've opened a pack of Theros Beyond Death. I think it was getting open just before, I think we were opening it just before COVID. And I was like, oh, I'll draft it. And like, I'll draft it pretty soon. And like COVID hit and I didn't go into a store. I've never opened a pack of Theros Beyond Death. I've never opened a pack of Ikoria. I've never opened a pack of M21. I don't own any of those cards. I don't have a single one. I was like going through the list. I was like, oh, I have a Thassa's Oracle. I was like, no, I've seen Thassa's Oracle in my arena collection a bunch of times, so I think I have one, but I don't own one.
Yeah, that's fair. I've like opened up
Crazy.
I opened up a lot of Theros. I opened up mystery boosters, but then like, yeah. Well, Ikoria and M20 happened in a pandemic, and I haven't really played. I bought singles in a pandemic. I keep posting cool single photos. What are new cards? Like, you literally can watch me. Oh, I got this today. These two today. R of Silence and Commit to Memory.
Sick. There was a bunch of stuff I've been seeing. Well, just to give a quick plug to Wizards, like bravo on the actual presentation of Double Masters of those box toppers, because they just
really good,
stunning art. I mean, like, too expensive. You're blurry.
It's fine.
Sucks.
Keep going.
What happened?
Is the world I live in. I held those cards
stunning
up,
art.
so it like refocused.
the Blood Moon is amazing. The Force of Will is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I like want it so badly. There's like so many cards of the box toppers that are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I have to tell you, so I don't spend that much money on Magic. I'm willing every once in a while to buy like an expensive card, you know, like I sort of recently bought like an Exploration Steam Vent. So I was like, that's a cool card. I love that card. I want to own that. So, you know, every once in a while I'll go and I'll drop like $100 on a card, something like that. But like very often I'm like reluctant to spend more than $100 on a card.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the fact that Wizards over the years continues to print expensive cards into existence, so that there's always like a holy grail of 500 expensive cards that I want to own that I probably never will. Like today I was like, oh man, those secret lair fetches are pretty cool. Like
mm-hmm.
I didn't buy the secret lair. Like, I wonder how much those are. I was like looking them up and I was like, I don't want to buy those. But like, man, I wish I had one. I sure wish I had a Misty Rainforest. That'd be cool to have, you know?
Yep, I get it. I understand the need to buy. As I'm like looking at this deck that I just put those cards into, and there's like an Ugin, a Japanese anime foil Ugin in there, and I'm like, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, it's cool. Promos are cool. I'm interested to see where stuff goes. I do think this set has its issues. I think Double Masters was a mistake from the perspective of it's on a PR level. Actually, I think like opening a pack of Double Masters hopefully is generally worth it. It's swinging in the margins, right? Like if you open up a double Geth foil pack, you're so sad with Double Masters, right? Because you've now paid double, like you're paying double the money for the bad moments, the sad pack opening moments. But most of the time the value is probably going to be there in the packs, so the sets are going to be worth more. So that's the benefit. It's just I don't know if stretching those two extremes to the distance that they're now at, where like the bad feeling is the same and the good feeling is much better, but you're paying more, so the bad feeling is that much worse, is a good thing or worth it.
Well,
like
I think there's also an overabundance of reprint sets. I mean, like that's not a thing we used to get all the time. I mean, I had a conversation with Eric the other day about this in the context of, you know, kind of the Highlander Gauntlet sort of version of Arena we're going to be talking about in a minute. And we were talking about Double Masters, and he was like, yeah, honestly, looking at the previews, there's a lot of beautiful cards, but these have all been reprinted, feels like kind of recently for the most part. There's not a lot in there that I see that's getting reprinted that gets me excited to buy these packs, because I've opened a lot of these cards, if not almost all of them, in other master sets over the last 3 or 4 years. And it's true. There's been so many reprint and master sets now that like there's not a lot of material for them to go back to. That's why the box toppers become like the thing that all the previews are box toppers.
Right. Except that a lot of these cards are still expensive, right? Like doubling season is still a $30 card. You know, like there's still stuff in these sets that are just very expensive. So it's interesting. It's like a game that like Wizards talked about, right? That's one of the reasons in the original Modern Master sets they were reprinting them every 2 years. Or they would only let up to 1 point, and then the next one would come out would only go 2 years farther, and so that way they always had at least recent sets. But once they got to kind of like Khans Black, stuff stopped being as old and expensive as it used to be, so they had to figure out new ways to do it. But yeah, that's interesting. So you just touched upon it, and it is the last thing I want to talk about today as far as historic goes and Arena, and it's this new format we've been working on, and it's called it's based on, we've talked about it a lot, a format called Highlander Gauntlet. It used to be called Highlander Roulette, and in paper Magic it's 100 card singleton. The reserve list is the ban list, so the only cards legal on it are cards that are not on the reserve list, and you build 6 decks, all singleton amongst each other. So if you have a Soul Ring in one deck, it can't be in any of the other decks. And if you have a Tinker in one deck, it can't be in any of the other decks. So this format kind of was created partially because, in fact, it was created by two people that just had lunch breaks together and worked in the same company and would just
but also it's important for history's sake, because I think those listening should understand this. It was created by those people, and it used to be called Foil Highlander Roulette, and it was only foils allowed, and they had to play with the actual foils they owned. So like the original version was that it was if a card had a foil printing, you could use it. We changed that to the reserve list because like there was just stupid stuff that was excluded, like every Commander product.
Well, and foils became a debatable item, right? Like our Invocations foil kind of are like the spell book releases. Do they count as foil? Yes. And like Wizards is playing more and more in that space. And so I was like reticent to be like, there might be like weird gold trim. Like, are the basic lands from the Unglued release from this year foil lands? They have gold trim on them, but there's not like a foil.
Well, I mean, that doesn't matter because, in terms of distinction. But anyway, I only added in because it's funny to think they were playing with literally all of the bad foils they owned to make a deck, and then that became like you have to build 6. There can be no repetitions, and we did that for a long time. We had an event we were going to actually play at GP Vegas last summer. We ended up deciding not to do it, and now this idea that you're kind of leading into is we can't play that format obviously on Arena because it doesn't exist. We can play it on Moto, but we want to invest in Arena. We think that Wizards is putting a lot of time and energy behind it, and it's a great format, or it's a great product. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to come up with a version we can play on Arena. So I'll let you continue.
Yeah. So there's obviously a few limitations on Arena, but I've been playing a lot of Gladiator Magic. This is a Ben Wheeler from LRR, kind of created format. At least he's been popularizing it pretty significantly. And what that is it's a 100-card singleton. It's like Canadian Highlander brought into Arena. And Highlander Roulette is like the version of Canadian Highlander that we play a lot. So I was like, oh, what is this possible? Is this something you can do? And kind of looked at the different things. One of the big challenges is the mana base, right? Like there's only 4 color fixing land cycles in Historic available. So you have Shocks, you have Temples, you have Check lands, and you have the Triomes, and then you have the other, and then beyond that you have the Guild Gates. You have bad Guild Gates, so just Guild Gates without the word gate attached to them, and you have the Gain lands. You then have Terramorphic Expanse, you have Evolving Wilds, and you have Sacred Passage, right? That's the
Fabled Passage.
Fabled Passage, the rare one. You have Field of Ruin, and you have the Lotus land. So those are the like.
There's like isn't there's like a Rupture Spire variant? I think you can play.
There's a few. Right? There's 2 different Rupture Spire. There's like the Gate Rupture Spire, and there's Rupture Spire. There's a few other bad limited color fixing lands, but those are like those 5. The 3 Evolving Wilds and the Lotus land and Field of Ruin are like the good mana fixer rares or mana fixing lands. So that's and then you have the new Jumpstart Enters Play, you choose a color lands, right? So those are kind of pseudo tri-land double lands because you could play them in 3 color decks and you can choose either or. And then so that's the mana fixing, and so that's a pretty big limitation. The other one is just Historic is a smaller card pool. So like, and trying to limit the amount of decks people have so people can be a little bit more creative. Because one of the cool things about Historic or Highlander is just people have different wheels that are totally different. And the way you kind of figure out the puzzle is really interesting. And so we wanted to make sure that was the same. So what we've leaned into is 4 100-card decks, singleton amongst all of them. And then you don't need... And then you just have to make sure that your color balance works. And so far it's been fun. In playtesting, open the feedback. It's best out of 5 matches or best out of 3. So in Highlander Roulette, it was best out of 3 or best out of 7. And 7 was like when you were 1-on-1. So me and Ben have played a lot of best out of 7 games because we'd be traveling together and playing. And the idea is you'd play... obviously if someone wins 4 games, they just win. So you play as many games as you want. You play as many games until someone gets to 4. If you get to the 3v3 moment, you then used to be you would roll off. So you'd roll to see which deck out of all of them. So it'd be back to kind of the beginning and you'd replay a deck. Towards the end, we were leaning towards you pick. So there's like a mind game of like, oh, if you're playing, I think your
He's
best.
gonna pick his best deck. He thinks it's his best deck. I think this is my best counter, but he knows I'm gonna think that, so I'm gonna pick
Right.
that whole thing.
There's like a fun game of like, oh, if I know what I'm worst against, I'm gonna play the best deck against what I think he'd pick against my will, and then you get into it. So it's really fun. So we wanted to replicate that. Also, just it makes it a little bit more manageable. Best out of 5 is easier than best out of 7. And it makes it a little bit, so if you're doing best out of 3, you get to play 3 out of your 4 decks, and it's fun for everyone. So that's a little bit more manageable on a time sync perspective. So it's we're excited about it. We'll probably be streaming it in some format, not during the commander stream, but on other nights. Michael has a wheel. We have a bunch of other people in Discord kind of building decks, and we're excited to try it out and play with everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really cool. It should be a really good opportunity for us to kind of bring some of the flair and energy that we've had with roulette for the last few years and kind of bring it to you guys. Because the thing is that's interesting is that even though the card pool is going to be like significantly less powerful, obviously, you don't get to play with all the vintage cards. Historic is just going to keep growing. And right now, for the foreseeable future, we're recording this end of July. I don't think we're going to really consistently be going to Magic events or stores, for some anywhere between the next 6 months and a year.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's probably realistic. Like could be end of the year, but I think it's realistically next year. So this will be the format. This will be the eternal format that we really, is getting pushed that we can commit some time into. And because it has so many similarities to historic in terms of the card pool and what's powerful, it'll be a really fun way for us to kind of develop our own thing and get you guys into it. And once paper Magic starts up again, we can go to stores again. We can maybe bring some of you guys over to Highlander Gauntlet because it is still my all-time favorite format. It's a harder one to approach.
Yeah, it's just so hard to build the decks. It's so much work, and this is a much more manageable, right? You only need 4 decks. It's on Arena, so it's a little bit easier to keep track of stuff. What I would recommend to players is and maybe what I'll do is I'll link to the Discord. I'll link to the Masters of Modern Discord. We'll have a room or an area just for whatever we end up calling this, Highlander or Gauntlet Roulette, Arena Highlander, whatever, Arena Gauntlet maybe is where we end up. But we'll have a Discord area for it, so people can jump in. Obviously, please, if you have a better name than I just came up, please comment there. So I'll put a link to our Discord, the MMCast Discord, into the description of this episode and this video, and then we'll also. What I might do is include either an image or just a Google Doc sheet that'll be locked, but you can see all the different lands that are available that you can print out and then just check off when you add them to decks to keep track. Because that's the thing that I like, especially with the thriving lands, the jumpstart lands. Those are the ones that I was like, oh, did I just put the white one in every one of these decks in this wheel? And when you look back, you're like, oh no, it's in 3 of them. Okay, I need to get rid of it in 2. So it's good to have a check mark list. But it's really fun. It's a blast.
Yeah, I also think so talk to me for a second, because I've only just started building my first deck, but you've already kind of got the full wheel together. You and Michael have been playing a little bit. What did you build? Kind of where did your design go?
So I started because the first thing I had built already was I started with my Gladiator decks, right? So I had an Abzan, and Michael literally just took 4 of his Gladiator decks and just made sure there are no crossovers, and then that's his wheel. So the first Gladiator deck I had was, or the one I was most excited about, was a Birthing Pod-esque green, black, white creature value shenanigan list, and right up my alley. Birthing Pod in every format. Yeah. And I was messing with it, and I realized because of the limitations of which lands you can have in each deck, and I knew I wanted to do a lands deck, so I wanted none of the fetch lands to be in this one. I brought it down to red black, and it just ended up being an aristocrats list, a red black aristocrats list. There's just so many powerful red black aristocrat cards that it made sense. Then I made a Bant half blue white control, half blue green ramp kind of situation. So it's a Bant ramp, Bant control deck that's playing Field of Ruin. And then there's a black white Soul Sisters deck that's just leaning into those cards because there's a lot of really powerful life gains matters cards. And it has the Sanguine Bond combo with the Vampire, the new one that was printed.
Yep.
Which is apparently
I'm assuming you play Luros in there probably.
Luros is in the Aristocrats deck.
Okay, gotcha.
Because you don't need white to play that card because it's a hybrid card. Yep. There's not an internet community that's very aggressive about the definition of hybrid.
It had lifelink, so I thought maybe you'd put it in there just to get
Yeah,
back all your like Sarah Ascendants and you're all like those things.
it could go in either one. It just is a little bit more valuable in the Aristocrats one, right? Because you're trying to sacrifice stuff. And there's an argument that there's like a Mardu Aristocrats Life Gain Soul Sisters deck that's out there that like you could combine the two and then do something else with some of the like red spells that I'm using there, and I might end up doing that in the long run. And then there's 4, right? So one more. Oh, just red green. Just red green good creatures and removal spells in red
gruel,
and
basically.
just gruel basically. I have a Grixis like discard based, like cycling discard based deck that was my 5th because I when I tried building this, I built it with 5 decks, and I tried building a 6th, and at that point I was like, oh, there's not enough lands to pull this off. Without like significantly having like a bunch of monocolor decks in the format. I was trying to make a Artifacts Matter Dance of Mance or whatever a deck, and that one was like kind of there, just all the artifacts you're playing with are very medium, and I just like wasn't able to cut down and get the colors right, so that's on my back burner for wheel 2. But I'm stoked by the format. It's really fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm gonna take probably the blue black roguish sort of thing. It's either that or a blue green merfolk. I think, and start with like one of those 2 styles. And kind of probably the blue black tempo is better because I don't think blue green tempo is something that's as good. I'll probably do that. That sounds really cool to me. There's definitely like a few. I think I could see building a mono red deck. It feels like there's enough in there that's cool. That would be a lot of fun.
Some of the decks I was like thinking of trying, mutate, cycling, like both of those have just like enough support for both of them that you can get enough payoffs to go like really pull it off. I think that there was a there's like the Birthing Pod deck I had originally is just like totally buildable. There's like also like a self mill available one. There's a bunch of spells matter cards, or like draw a second card turn spell effects that are also really good.
There's a good proliferate sub theme with like planeswalkers you can kind of go with if you did like Bant. Like there's like a Bant Walkers, because there's like a bunch of those War of the Spark cards that take advantage of that. Like obviously you have the 2 mana card, the draw card proliferate. You have like the creatures. There's 2 creatures I think that are both legal when they deal damage. I know there's the white one, and I think there's a Oh no, that's not. That's an Aether Revolt.
Sure.
But there's a white one that prolifferates when it deals damage.
There's the landfall one. There's the spells whenever you cast a spell proliferate. There's a lot of really good proliferate spells, right? And then there's Enchantress, right? Enchantress is around. There's like Dredge. Like there's definitely some really cool different stuff you can do.
Yeah, it's gonna be really fun. So be sure to go if you're watching this on YouTube right now. Hit that subscribe button. Obviously, leave a comment below if you have any questions with your thoughts on this format because we're pretty excited about this. I think this is gonna be something you guys are gonna start to see on the Cass Wiley Twitch. You'll see it on my Twitch as well, which is Ben Bateman streaming. And we'll be playing more of it. We'll be trying to kind of introduce this as a piece of the podcast. So hit that thumbs up button, guys. Hit subscribe. Leave a comment below. And I think that's gonna kind of wrap up the episode for tonight.
Make sure to follow us on the internet. I am at Cass Wiley everywhere, from Twitch to Discord to Facebook to not Facebook. I guess I'm just Alex Kessler there. Use your real name, to Instagram to Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. If you have any questions, you want to hang out. Make sure to follow the MMCast. We're at the MMCast on Twitter. You can please follow, like, subscribe on YouTube. Check out our Patreon. It is how all of the editing that Marshall has to do to make this a feasible kind of enterprise to work, and all the equipment stuff that have been able to increase all of our efforts in the streaming world, as well as just being able to do this during a COVID moment, is all provided by our patrons. Thank you so much to everyone who's been a contributor this whole time, and we appreciate you. You don't even know how much we appreciate you guys and girls.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. You guys can follow me at Ben Bateman Media. Obviously, check out what I'm doing over on youtube.com/nerdsandsuits. I've got cool interviews going up on there, music stuff as well. And then twitch.tv/Ben Bateman streaming is the new thing I'm putting a lot of time into. So thanks for watching.
One last thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. In your thank yous. But this weekend is Gen Con. We are going to do Battle Boss streaming content. So we kickstarted a game a year and a half ago. It comes out this October. And we are going to do live stream previews of stuff. We're going to preview 4-player mode. We're going to do a live stream commander or kind of design panel where Ben's going to interview me and Michael. That's probably happening Friday morning. So this like earlier today, but we'll be available there in video form. And then there's just going to be a bunch of other content. You can pre-order battle bosses for the first time. So if you go to kess.co/shop, you can buy battle bosses. It's available to pre-order. It'll get to you by November. And you can buy the deluxe version or individual bosses. And the more you buy now, the more helpful it is for us because we're like doing final ordering. They're cutting tooling as we speak. We just finally got all the graphics to them, the factory. So we're getting to the point where we're going to have to eventually write like the actual quantities we bring in. And the more of a read we get from people pre-ordering it, the more we can bring in and kind of build a community around it. So definitely check that out. Please keep an eye out. We'll be live streaming on YouTube channel and Twitch and all those other places, Battle Bosses content all weekend. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I can't believe I almost
forgot guys.
That. All right. Thanks, everybody. You guys are the best. Talk to you next week.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.